of the strictly financial realm that Magic Bullet was asking about, but I think we should put all of these pieces on the table while we're examining foreknowledge and the question of foreknowledge. So, of course, one of the most important aspects of this question of foreknowledge, well, if there is this coronavirus pandemic that really is spreading around the world, well, did scientists know about it beforehand? Could they have predicted it beforehand? Well, they certainly did on numerous occasions. That's why, for example, Event 201 was ostensibly being held, is because scientists knew there was going to be the emergence of some new disease X, as they literally called it in a lot of their pandemic planning scenarios, disease X. How did they know? Well, maybe because they were working on it. They were literally engineering something like this in various laboratories, including the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They were specifically working on this type of human spreading SARS-like bat-derived cluster of coronaviruses, and had been for many years in something called gain-of-function research, which has been funded to the tunes of many hundreds of millions of dollars by various governments around the world over the past decade or two, and is totally defensive, guys. Don't worry about it. See, scientists are just going to find the different ways that these viri, can be engineered in a lab to more effectively kill people or to more effectively transmit among the population. What kind of spike proteins have to be added in what combinations, what kind of genetic sequencing do we have to do to make it so that this will spread more efficiently, or it will have a longer incubation period so people can spread it more before they even realize they have it. Just totally defensive, guys, just so that we know what this would look like, and maybe we can work on vaccines beforehand. Don't worry, nothing to worry about. And we get this, for example, from Nature Medicine, which had a November 2015 article, "A SARS-like cluster of circulating bat coronaviruses shows potential for human emergence," where they note about the research, the gain-of-function research that was going on amongst bat coronaviruses to look for, well, what would a SARS-like bat coronavirus that was spreading through the human population, how would that work? And what would be the most efficient way for this to happen? And all of these questions. A number of important things to note about this. For one, of course, one of the people working on this was Zhengli Shi, the key laboratory of special pathogens and biosafety at Wuhan Institute of Virology researcher for the Chinese Academy of Sciences. That's interesting. Another interesting person involved with this is Ralph S. Barrick, someone who deserves some looking into, and his connections to this type of gain-of-function research. But beyond the researchers themselves, and the fact that, yes, the Wuhan Institute of Virology was involved in deriving and sequencing and studying these bat coronaviruses, it also has some interesting revelations about the fact that in 2015, when they wrote this article, there were essentially two main paradigms of thought in the scientific community about how these bat coronaviruses could emerge into the human population. And it says in this article, which is highly technical, I understand it's not for laymen, but it does have this passage, which I think is important. It says, for both paradigms, i.e. both of the different theories that were circulating in the scientific community at that time about the ways that this bat coronavirus could emerge into the human population, spike adaptation in a secondary host is seen as a necessity, with most mutations expected to occur within the RBD, thereby facilitating improved infection. Both theories imply that pools of bat coronaviruses are limited, and that host-range mutations are both random and rare, reducing the likelihood of future emergence events in humans. I.e., well, it's not really that much of a looming threat that could strike at any time, because it's extremely rare. It's the kind of thing that would probably only ever emerge in a laboratory. Of course, in that paper, they go on to propose a different paradigm, by which, no, these spike protein adaptations are already there, and they just have to circulate in the right way to get into the human population, which is now, of course, what they're going with. But even at that time, even Nature magazine itself was warning about this research that it was publishing. Just a week after the publication of that article, Nature published this one, "Engineered Bat Virus Stirs Debate Over Risky Research," noting the very real dangers of this type of laboratory-engineered virus research that was going on at that time, and noting, for example, quote, an experiment that created a hybrid version of a bat coronavirus, one related to the virus that causes SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, has triggered renewed debate over whether engineering lab variants of viruses with possible pandemic potential is worth the risks. In an article published in Nature Medicine on 9th of November, scientists investigated a virus called SHCoV-14, which is found in horseshoe bats in China. The researchers created a chimeric virus made up of a surface protein of SHCoV-14 and the backbone of a SARS virus that had been adapted to grow in mice and to mimic human disease. The chimera infected human airway cells, proving that the surface protein of SHCoV-14 has the necessary structure to bind to a key receptor on the cells and to infect them. It also caused disease in mice, but did not kill them. Virologists question whether the information gleaned from the experiment justifies the potential risk. Although the extent of any risk is difficult to assess, Simon Wayne Hobson, a virologist at the Pasteur Institute in Paris, points out that the researchers have created a novel virus that grows remarkably well in human cells. If the virus escaped, nobody could predict the trajectory, he says. The only impact of this work is the creation in a lab of a new non-natural risk, agrees Richard Ebright, a molecular biologist and biodefense expert at Rutgers University in Piscataway, New Jersey. Both Ebright and Wayne Hobson are long-standing critics of gain-of-function research. But don't worry, guys. You're just a crazy conspiracy theorist if you think there is anything worth looking into here, because Nature itself has once again come forward to assure us that this has nothing to do with SARS-CoV-2. Don't worry, guys, because they've added an editor's note to that very article that they published in November 2015, warning us about the dangers of this risky bat coronavirus research by saying, we are aware that this story is being used as the basis for unverified theories that the novel coronavirus causing COVID-19 was engineered. There is no evidence that this is true. Scientists believe that an animal is the most likely source of the coronavirus. How many weasel words and sentences do they have there? There is no evidence that it's true. Scientists believe an animal is the most likely source of the coronavirus. Again, a lot of different outs for when and if they discover something different many years down the road. But we don't have to go out on that speculative limb. Because although there has been a not an explanation, but a sort of theory for the origins of SARS-CoV-2 published in, of course, once again, Nature Medicine in March of 2020, specifically the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2, where they do try to make the argument that, this couldn't be lab engineered because of X, Y, and Z. Well, if you want a detailed and very persuasive breakdown of why X, Y, and Z is total cockamamie horsehooey, I would definitely suggest checking out a couple of very interesting articles from Harvard to the Big House, which are very detailed, very scientific, very learned, obviously written by people with scientific expertise, but also containing colorful expletives and metaphors and what have you. So it's an interesting read in a lot of different respects, but certainly for debunking this proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2, the articles are China Owns Nature Magazine's Ass, debunking the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2, claiming COVID-19 definitely wasn't from a lab, and No Monkey Ever Reheated a Frozen Burrito, what the Expanse tells us about the COVID-19 pandemic and serial passage gain-of-function research. Which, despite the whimsical titles, I guarantee you are very detailed and very interesting articles with lots and lots of links and different sources that need to be investigated on this. But essentially, it does break down to the fact that the very scientists involved in this gain-of-function research, which other scientists have been ringing the alarm about, ringing the warning bell about, saying they're creating new non-natural threats in these laboratories, are now the very scientists that are coming out and saying, don't worry, this couldn't possibly have come from a laboratory. And there's a lot of very specific scientific reasons why what they're saying is not factually true. I will leave that to you to investigate further, and I'm sure we'll be circling around to this topic many times in the future. But this does certainly raise yet another question in the was there foreknowledge of the Plandemic question scenario, I mean, assuming there is a globally spreading novel coronavirus, the question of could scientists have possibly predicted it kind of gets superseded by the question of was it created in a laboratory? And there's certainly the reasons they say that couldn't possibly be true are debunked nonsense. The question of whether it is true, again, there needs to be a lot more research on that, but who are you going to turn to for the research? The people involved in the gain of function research, whose entire careers, everything they do and everything that they stand upon and their entire place in society rests on them not being the spreaders of some globally spreading supervirus, whatever you make of the novel coronavirus and the hype surrounding it at the moment. Anyway, it's an interesting question, but we should just add one other tiny piece to this puzzle. I'm sure it's not important, guys. Don't think too deeply about it, but we should note that original November 2015 study about the bat coronaviruses, SARS-like cluster of bat coronaviruses that kicked off all that controversy. We should note that Nature did have to append a little correction to that article after it was published. Namely, in the version of this article initially published online, the authors omitted to acknowledge a funding source. USAID EPT predict funding from EcoHealth Alliance to ZLS. The error has been corrected for the print, PDF, and HTML versions of this article, and ZLS, of course, is Zhengli Shi, that Wuhan Institute of Virology researcher, who, yes, to make that explicit, was directly receiving funding from USAID Predict, i.e. the Predict system, which was shut down in late September of 2019, right before the novel coronavirus emerged, the very thing it had been set up to be the early warning for, and this funding was just omitted from that virus research when it was first published for some reason. There are so many different angles to this that it becomes overwhelming, but I think it's pretty safe to say that if you find anything of interest in all of these myriad different connections, then you're a crazy conspiracy theorist and must be shunned from society for not trusting the scientists. Which scientists? Oh, the ones that we tell you to trust. The ones that are being funded by these various agencies. And again, the craziness upon craziness upon craziness just continues to pile up, and we've really only scratched the surface here, but I hope this goes some way towards at least providing a bit of research that you can follow up on if you are curious about this question. Was there foreknowledge of the plandemic? I think it's certainly leaning that way, but I'll leave you to come to your own conclusions about that. Anyway, thank you for broaching the topic, Magic Bullet. I know specifically you were asking about financial foreknowledge, and I'm sure there are many other things to say on that we'll have to come back to in the future, but I did want to get this question of foreknowledge out on the table today. And as always, I do encourage the Corbett Report community to chip in with your own research, anything that adds to what has been put forward here today, or contradicts it, or anything else, please leave it in the comment section of this post on CorbettReport.com. It is through this open source investigation, piecing together information from a million different sources, that we can ever hope to get closer to approximating the truth on a vastly complicated subject like this one. That all being said, in this doozy of an episode, let me remind you, the show notes for this video will include all of the links to all of the things that I've just cited, so there's a lot of research there to be had. I hope you will take advantage of it. That's going to do it for today. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, looking forward to talking to you again in the very near future.
The Corbett Report is brought to you by you. Your support makes the Corbett Report possible. Sign up for the subscriber newsletter or purchase a DVD at corbettreport.com/support.